This morning is just for me to give us some quick charge pointers, tips, so that we'll be able to get up for the year. This is our first session for the year, and it will be good to remind ourselves on certain things, some key important things about research journey. Very well, I know them down. So I would say my core message for you for today and for this year is less of confusion, more clarity, and more focus, because that is what will lead us to progress. So I say this year, we stop confusing effort with progress. They are two different things. We can put so much effort and just be running in circles. So it's important that we don't fall into that trap. Being part of this community, we'll move away from that. That is exactly what most researchers do. And they fail not because they are not intelligent, not because they don't have a good data or materials, or they don't have enough time. They fail because there is no structure, there is no rhyme, and there is no feedback. And that's why coming here every time it's important for this year. Sorry to use you again, Lydia. Lydia have been in her study for 5 good years. No clarity, no structure, no progress. But she has been putting effort. That's why I said we must not confuse effort with progress. Despite after 5 years, we'll have to revisit the foundation, which is the problem statement. It was after that we now structure and the clarity now came. Now she can progress. So my first part of what I want to say today is research. I put it down, I'm reading. Research is not a test of how smart you are. It is a test of how structured your thinking is. I will repeat it again. Research is not a test of how smart you are. It is a test of how structured your thinking is. Now, I will say this as a follow-up. If we go to the internet, especially in this first month of the year, it's always motivation. We will finish. We will progress. God will help us. By this time next year, we'll be doing this. And I will say it with a bold face. Motivation will not carry you this year. Motivation, if it is they will say, who motivation help? System, it's only what will carry you through this process. System. The number 2, your supervisor is not your research manager. It is a gospel truth that we need to tell each other. You are the manager of your research. You own this process. That's why part of what you must do as the owner of the process is to do what? Ensure you show up, embed yourself, ask questions, progress with clarity. Most of us are working and we know what processes are in an organization. We have different processes and every process has process owner. So in this research process, you are the owner of the process. Then the next is more reading does not mean more clarity. More reading does not mean more clarity. Direction should be your watchword. That's what this means. Direction comes before depth. You must make sure you define your direction properly, else you will be all over, digging so deep with no relevance. So these are the whole thing that if you have, anxiety will not come close to you, because at every point in time, you know what you're doing. Then the next part of what I want to say today is, I wrote it here and I said, what I am trying to move forward this week, it's something that you must ask yourself every day. So you set up some certain rules that will help you every week. You can call it your research rhyme, you can call it your research guide or whatever. Every week, you ask yourself, what am I trying to move forward with this week? Which section do I want to tackle? Which one task do I want to focus on? And then you have to make that one decision to help you to do that. The next thing is, what evidence or thinking do I need to produce? Research cannot be complete without evidence. So you must ask yourself that. What evidence or thinking do I need to produce? Do I need to have some notes? Do I need to have an outline of the section I'm working on? Is it a draft I need to produce for a certain section? What is it exactly? But note one thing about this. The most important thing is how logical you are, but not how perfect you are. If you go to our YouTube, we don't have much video there, but there's a particular video that speaks about how to write without getting stuck. Go to the YouTube, researcher community, how to write without getting stuck. You will see that there's a whole lot of stages there that speak about drafting and not perfection. You make sure you add things as you go. There is a stage where you now think perfection or putting them, even there is no how you get to perfection, but at least fine-tune it to be better. Then the last question there will be, what question is currently blocking me, or what is currently blocking me from moving forward? What exactly is holding me? Is he understanding a set particular concept or whatever? Then once you do this, or once you ask this last question, you will be able to see something that is left unanswered in your head. Then you need to tackle that, because probably that is what is keeping you, not that you are stuck. I wrote it this way. I say, if you cannot name the blocker, you are not stuck. You are unstructured. If you cannot name what is holding you, you are not stuck. But if you can name it, but you are struggling, yeah, that's also okay. You are meaning that once someone throw a light on that, then you progress. Then the next part of what I want to talk about, I take it the 5 research rules for the year, which every community member must take serious. Rule number one, stop rewriting before you finish writing. That's why they call it draft. Drafting is not submitting. I'll repeat that rule number 1 again. Stop rewriting before you finish writing. That's why I recommend you to go watch that, how to write without getting stuck. So tell yourself and remind yourself all the time that draft is allowed to be ugly. Draft is allowed to be all over the show. It's allowed to be everywhere. Then rule number 2, clarity beats volume. We've seen situations where students will send a work, pages full, but amounting to nothing. Clarity beats volume. It is not in the multitude of articles you consume or you're reading. It's in the clarity of which article makes sense or is relevant. So remind yourself constantly that, let's say, 10 relevant papers worth more than 100 papers that are just everywhere. That's why we said endeavor to identify a seed article in your research focus area. Get the seed article. Those articles from well-known voice in that area of research, cited by so many. One good thing about those articles is that it helps you, or it draws you closer to other materials that could be relevant to your work. Rule number 3, your research must answer one central question. If everything feels important, nothing will move. We have a client, her work is wonderful, but she's holding on to two important things, and both are dragging each other in such a way that the research lacked direction. And what we did is to do what? Relegate one, project one ahead of the other, and make the other one metric to measure the other. It was then we were able to structure the research, and now she's progressing smoothly. So it's very important that your research must answer one central question. That central question should be what everything must revolve around. You cannot solve all the problems in this world in one research. there are other researchers. That's why there is always research gap to work on. Rule number 4, confusion is data, not failure. That you are confused is actually a good thing in research. Because by the time you deal with that confusion, you will see how you will progress. Because the confusion tells you where you should focus on next or what is missing. So when you are confused, do not be dismayed. It's part of the process. Only sit and ask yourself, what is it that is confusing me? Then by the time you respond to that question, you move ahead. And rule number 5, the last, isolation slows completion. There's an illusion around postgraduate studies that postgraduate studies is a lonely journey, not supposed. They say emphatically there is a lonely journey. You always hear about the loneliness of this journey, which is actually what we are debunking research to say that postgraduate journey is not supposed to be lonely. That you can be practiced, worked within a community. And that's why we are convening this ecosystem, so that you are not in isolation. Motivation comes from each other. Someone might ask a question, someone responding to it will clear the doubt of a lot of people, and then people will move forward. So that is the last rule. That is the last rule. Isolation slows completion. So endeavor to show up, because research progress actually faster within a community. That's why research meet and right of research only exists, so that you are not alone in this journey. Then I move on to the next of my tips and points for us this year as community members. Is what we will normally do every time we meet here. We say the first thing you do is to map out what you will achieve for the day. So I ask you today, what is your aim for being here today? Is it to write one page of what? Write it down. What is it that you want to achieve today being here? And this will be recorded that anytime you come, the first thing is, what is it have I mapped out to achieve for the session? And when you go into it, it must be guided by, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can say, you can even put it this way to guide you. I want to develop the rough sketch of my problem statement. I want to develop a rough sketch of my literature review. Something like that. Like we will say, you don't need to edit it, just write. When you do this, it will help you to build your momentum as you're going, or as you show up every day, even or when you want to study or do anything on your own at your private time. And my closing, I will read what I wrote here. If you show up consistently, ask honest questions, that vulnerable questions about research, and work with clarity and structure, this year will not be easy, but there will be progress. I will repeat that again. If you show up consistently, ask honest questions, and work with clarity and structure, this year will not be easy, but it will be progressive. So, this is a space for you to achieve what you want to achieve within your research. It's a safe space. It's a space to make progress. It's a thinking space. It's a crying space. It's a vulnerable space. It's a space to feel strong. And I leave you with this point I've said today. But note the last one, that if you work with clarity, if you work with structure, if you ask questions so that you could get help, research will definitely still be research, which is tough, right? But definitely there will be progression. You'll proceed from one stage to another until the end. That's my word to you today.